believe it was Parmenides, the Greek philosopher, who in 500 BC wrote in his poem Periphyseos about the visage of aletheia, the understanding of a whole truth, that reality itself is uniform, undivided, and impossible to break. But with the rise of pragmatism and critique of the world portrayed in the 17th century Baroque era, painters, artists, and craftsmen alike began to challenge this conception by introducing reflection. Mirrors took main stage in so many artworks you could never escape their grasp, and with mirrors came distortion, the unsettling realization of many that representation of oneself could no longer be trusted to align with existence as we know it. Throughout the following centuries, mirrors, glass in specific, came to be seen as both reflective of truth and yet a symbol of its fragility. And through expressionism, through books, through written plays, and through the age of cinema, these thematics grew and evolved exponentially, which brings us to now, the modern day. TV franchises, box office bangers, and of course, the revelation that is manga. Sazanami Kyora smashes the possibility, his alternate universe, into smithereens, and it fractures in the form of glass shards. His could have been truth gone in a moment's notice. But what if you apply that philosophy to the real world? What if there was a man so beyond it all that when glass breaks, reality ruptures? Soga's character is deeply embroiled into meta-narratives. The Enchanted Blades have always been treated as something beyond human comprehension, yet with every instance so far, they've been somewhat relegated to comprehensible natural association, such as birds with the Tobimune, weather with the Cloud Gouger, goldfish with the Enten. And while the Shinichi very clearly creates flowers, many cultures believe and treat insects as something not from nature, but of divine punishment. In Abrahamic traditions, due to its indiscriminate, destructive, and immoral behavior, it's seen more as a mythos of plague rather than nature taking its course. Take it a step further into demonology and you get caricatures like Beelzebub, an insectoid demon who leaves nothing behind but corruption and waste. Fire Force uses bugs as a vehicle of converting human beings into infernal Adola, its version of hell, all to drive home the narrative about just how beyond this world insects really are. And even from an etymology standpoint, butterflies are known worldwide as a symbol for small, inconsequential action that leads to incomprehensible catastrophe. And when you start looking at both him and the Shinichi as the personification of something beyond the narrative itself, everything clicks into place. For starters, Kyora and Samura both call the blade and its wielder without compare. And while you can argue that all the Enchanted Blade wielders are irreplaceable, the story itself undermines that claim. And in that case, it's almost like the narrative itself clarifies that there will never be another Akemura Soga, or in short, another person in this whole series that will properly wield the Magatsumi beyond him. And when I mean the narrative, I'm talking about pre-established beliefs and ideas by other characters that get completely dunked on by the very existence of Soga. For example, Kuguri goes in depth regarding how rare and unique the EIY purity style is, just for us to learn that Soga could learn it in a moment's notice, but decided not to. That's a character that breaks the very essence of the narrative, someone who exists beyond it. For a more hands-on example, his recontextualization from someone insane, having lost his mind, to talking about Chihiro's way as a baby. He plays with tension, the expectation of both the character and the reader, his impulsive killing intent activating at a moment's notice when Chihiro says something he's not supposed to. It all serves to characterize his very existence as chaos incarnate. Even the chapter title Destiny creates a scope larger than the narrative itself, that this meeting was fated, meant to happen the moment this manga began. The title can alternatively be read as karma, which sparks a fascinating discussion regarding cause and effect, consequences, and the one who has to pay for them. Continuing from the last chapter, since the Enchanted Blade wielders are to be considered heroes, Soga must then represent the epitome of what a hero looks, acts, and behaves like, the role in its purest state. And this disorderly conduct is most definitely where the core of his heroism lies in. While the internet calls it aura farming, what Soga displays here is doing whatever the fuck he wants. regrets. The wielders are introduced in their own segregated regret boxes, showcasing different levels of shame, guilt, and contemplation for the war crimes they've enacted. Yet, in arguably the worst box of them all, for the worst crime of them all, there's zero sense of moral reprehension. While I already talked a decent chunk about his inhumane aspects, what really stands out to me is this broken display window. A petty crime, theft. I severely doubt Akemura's past was of deviancy and criminal history, especially knowing all the blade wielders were master swordsmen before the Seitei War even began, so what's really happening here is a simple abuse of power. Soga understands just what perks come with being seen as a hero, one of the biggest ones being zero accountability. Like Gojo Satoru, the Japanese society hinges on his existence and the idealized image they've built around him. It almost makes me wonder if, beyond the established motives of this chapter, Akemura intends to set this tragedy into motion as a test to see just how much the government can cover up before the real truth comes to light. And just like Gojo, a personality like this is conjured from a very young age, being given everything, treated as exceptional, all because of his specialty. Does that specialty come from the secretive Soga lineage, or did he prove himself so early that everything afterward became a testament to his one-of-a-kind nature? After all, you don't just become friends with Kunishige Rokuhira without being at least some type of monster yourself. On to some parallel bocce. Strap your boots because we've got quite a few this time. And it all starts here. Chapter 31, aptly titled Greetings. No, don't click off. I know you see it. While Yura holds his interest in Chihiro's mental growth, external power scaling, and measuring the distance, Soga's here to see his baby boy all grown up. While Chihiro is the one forcing aggression onto Yura with close to zero pushback, here Soga takes the initiative, with Chihiro being on the receiving end. Oh, and the blade on the neck? Complete family hostage situation. Just like his first fight with Yura, he's going to have to escape, because this is a foe far too dangerous for now. But not before we get some serious heart-to-heart talks, the kind Kunishige never got to have with him. Soga wears a very pensive face when he asks Chihiro to lay down the sword, which immediately brings you back to his first encounter with the samurai. Neither of the two want to involve him in this, rather keep the kids out of it. But unlike Chihiro's immature and uncontrolled rage and disbelief at the Uruha situation, this time there's a deep, mature sense of reluctance. Rather than panic, he's filled with conviction. Soga's hatred for villains is in direct reference to Chihiro's mindset in chapter 1 that they must be cut down. What's lost in the English translation, however, is that he says torikobosanai, which has only ever been used once by, you guessed it, Hakuri, the boy he's now gunning to kill. They carry the same mindset from two opposing ends of society's ladder, but Soga's radical extremism decrees him to be executed. From a Japanese wording perspective, this chapter speaks of shime, mission, over and over and over again. And while its use is very linear in Kagurabachi, I can't but think about it in regards to Ikura. Again, knowing the title of this chapter and all. The ideas of fulfilling one's role are very traditional in mindset, reflecting his theorized archaic background. Yet it's also something that's been repeated to death through the Sazanami family. That is to say, I can only imagine this belief has been instilled into him through the war and his counter-sorcery army superiors at the time. Ironically, it might have very well been the malediction, an unexpected act of defiance that broke him free from those instilled values and expectations. And like already covered, Soga does not use EIY purity style, which then begs the question, what does he use? Something he came up with himself? Would you really classify as a sword saint if you didn't create your own signature sword style? And if you ever needed any more connecting factor to why Yura and Soga decided to team up, it'd be their same point of confusion in Kunishige sealing the enchanted blades, only that emotion coming from two vastly different origin points. Now for some closure. There are two dialogue lines in this dual issue that have ruined my good night's sleep for days in a row. The manga has made significant efforts to assign a special font to every single enchanted blade thus far. Such a decision is obviously made in search of aesthetic and finding fonts that best suit both the ability, the look, and the feel that the blade represents. Never once in this manga, however, has a blade's incantation been chanted without the use of brackets. Not until now. Matter of fact, this isn't our first look at the Magatsumi chant either, for it already happened in chapter 40 and thereafter, where it looked as one would expect. So what's different? Besides the obvious of having full control over the blade rather than using it remotely through a sacrificial lamb, I think there's a very obvious answer here. The same way that sorcery has its limits, I believe Kunishige made one fundamental error in his thinking, believing that no one could reach the ceiling. To quote his words, that theoretical limit has no bound as long as their owner desires. If these chapters have shown me anything, it's that Akemura Soga breaks all the realms of logic. Even the scholars believe that the malediction couldn't be possible, simply because a human should never be able to reach such a state. But if he could, then what? Such a being could surely break free of all narrative limitations, literally breaking the fourth wall to erase the brackets from the enchanted blade, making it reach its true fullest potential. I mean, the blade has more than 3 abilities. Who decided that a blade can't have more than 3 abilities? In fact, the very nature of the enchanted blade invites the idea that it can grow beyond its confine. And if those confines were to be the 3 ability threshold, then by all means, any enchanted blade could reach that potential, even the Enten. We've long since pondered what Kunishige meant by speaking of the Shinichi as different in quality, and while we have a good few explanations, one being the fact that it can be used by people without forming contracts, and the other its superior position as the mothership for all enchanted blades, can that really be all? But if Kunishige realized firsthand the true potential of what his creations can end up as, wouldn't that be the final nail in the coffin? The one revelation capable of instilling more fear in him than anything else? Wouldn't that be what really pushed him down a path of darkness until he finally reached the conclusion that the enchanted blades must be destroyed? It definitely could. And even with all that theory crafting in mind, there's more. The default stance I expect most readers to take is surely that trusting the words of a genocidal maniac is pointless. And on a moral level, that instinct is correct. But I say with clarity that Soga may paradoxically be one of the most objectively reliable voices when it comes to the facts, simply because that's all he cares about. Ethics exit the equation, and what you're left with is logic. This isn't to justify his actions, and even Soga makes no attempt at self-justification. He states conditions, not excuses. Having the same blood is straight out of a World War II era Third Reich rhetoric, and by all means should be viewed with the historical weight such phrasing has. Yet the line that matters to me far more, having been taught the same things reframes everything. This is where Kagurabachi reminds you what it began as, and what I'm sure it will turn out to be. Not just a story about genocide, but a story that started out as a war and only after turned into it. The public unquestioningly believes in the Kaminabi, accepting their word as gospel. Why would the Islanders be any different? We knew they had a royal regime, and now confirming the obvious, an educational system. If Japan has propaganda, then Shokoku almost certainly does too. School and education sit at the very center of Iori's character arc as crucial plot elements regarding hiding the truth and living in ignorance. And it's also the very same chapters that we get to learn both from Shiba and Yura the events of the Seitei War. Not lies necessarily, but their own selective truths. I don't think this war has been framed as pure evil versus pure victims, but instead it's gotten the treatment necessary for what it is, a war. And one of the most universal byproducts of war is propaganda on both sides. History is written by the victors, yet even then, someone had to initiate the invasion. Why did they initiate? Were the Islanders Islanders taught to hate Japan the same way Japan was taught to fear them? Were they raised on stories of savage brutes, fear-mongered threats, and ended up initiating, all in self-defense? I have no proof of this, but the fact that the series even introduces the possibility, combined with how consistently morally blurry Kagurabachi has been when dealing with war, sends a Marley-shaped shiver down my spine. Because if the series has such frontal focus on the heroes that we make ourselves to be, why did we never consider that the Islanders surely had heroes of their own?